Welcome, dear friends, to America First One-on-One, where we talk to the most interesting, knowledgeable guests on the key issues of the day. Not in sound bites, not in talking points, but we get to do the deep dive. If you've been following the collapsing narrative around health policy and the coronavirus, you will, of course, have seen several of Joe Rogan's interviews with key practitioners. Robert Malone is the most recent one, but if you didn't watch all 3 hours of it, you should. There's a moment where the good doctor, the inventor of the mRNA vaccine, has this to say about somebody else that you should be listening to. Play cuts.
You know, Peter McCullough is the textbook example of hunting physicians, right? The guy is 150,000 in debt right now in the hole in trying to defend his medical license. This is one of the most highly published authors in the world. He's an exceptional researcher, you know, and apparently a pretty good podcaster too.
He's great. I mean, the guy's published more in his field than any other physician in history.
And Baylor's trying to take him out. And it's not only Baylor, it's some entity outside of Baylor that's come in and is financing the attacks on him.
Why would that be? Let's talk to the man who was making news for speaking the truth long before that podcast you heard. We are delighted to have him back on this show. He was recently with me on Newsmax. He is Dr. McCullough, Peter McCullough, practicing internist, cardiologist in Texas. He is the host of the McCullough Report on America Out Loud Talk Radio and senior medical advisor for truthforhealth.org. Dr. McCullough, welcome back to One-on-One.
Thanks for having me.
Doctor, let's start for those who haven't heard your interview with Joe Rogan or your previous interviews with us or on Newsmax. I'd like to start at the beginning. Maybe somebody received this link, had it shared with them, haven't heard of you before. You have an incredible resume, especially when it comes to the peer-reviewed articles you've written. Would you talk a little about your background in medicine and your publishing history?
I'm an academic physician in Dallas, Texas, so I spend about half my time in clinical practice. I'm doing patient calls today, but about half of my time in academics as an author. I'm an editor of a major journal and a clinical investigator. So I've been the principal investigator of large randomized trials and large observational studies. I've been on the clinical executive committees, adjudication committees. I chair day safety monitoring boards for over 24 studies, and I've published more than 650 publications in the National Library of Medicine, the peer-reviewed literature. It's always thought maybe more than 25 would be good enough to make professor. So I'm far beyond that. And in COVID-19, I've really dropped everything to apply all my scholarship to COVID-19 to, in a sense, patriotically try to help out the nation and the world. And I have over 50 publications in COVID-19 and really outlining an approach that in my view we should take to treat patients early to reduce the risk of hospitalization and death. And now this year I've kept a careful watch on vaccine safety and efficacy.
That's an incredible resume. More than justifies you being termed an expert on the field, but more importantly, you are a truth teller, and we're going to discuss all the censorship that's occurring, all the politicization of the practice of medicine. But first, can we start with the basics? We have enough time. This is where we spend the time to discuss these issues. So first things first, viruses in general. There is still to this day, as I understand as a layman, a disagreement or two schools of thought. Are they living entities or are they not, or do they exist in some twilight zone? So let's start with what is a virus, and then we'll get to the coronavirus family.
A virus is a living organism. It does depend on a host in order to infect and replicate. It's unlike a bacteria, which must feed on substances. The virus basically is designed to simply replicate and move on and then infect another individual. But it is alive. There's another substance that's not alive that can spread from one to another. It's called a prion, which is just a protein. But viruses are alive. They're either RNA or DNA viruses. In the setting of the coronavirus, it's an RNA virus. So it has a nucleocapsid. And this virus is particularly supercharged with the spike protein. The spike protein is the spine on the ball of virus. That's been genetically modified in the lab in Wuhan, China, to be more infectious and more deadly.
All right, let's talk about this variety, the corona. Talk to us about all the various members of this family. What is a coronavirus? And it can include things which are relatively innocuous, like the common cold, correct?
True. The coronavirus, because there's a nucleocapsid and there's a ball and then there's these spines, the spike protein, it does have a corona around it. And there's a family of these viruses. They cause the common cold. And and one of the reasons why they do is they can't invade the human body. The common cold basically is nasal congestion and it's a sore throat, but it doesn't invade the human body. SARS-CoV-2 was genetically modified with what's called a gain of function research, and there's a particular joint between the S1 and the S2 segment of the spike protein. The S2 segment is anchored to the nucleocapsid. S1 is the outer segment. The S1 actually binds with a human receptor called the ACE2 receptor, and then an endogenous enzyme called furin allows a cleavage, and then the virus can actually inject itself into the body. So in the lab, the innovation was to actually make a furin cleavage joint and then allow the virus to inject itself into the human body and actually cause systemic disease.
With the newest revelations, the military documents concerning Dr. Fauci and funding of experimentation in the Chinese military defense lab in Wuhan, let's spend a little bit of time on this issue. What is the why is there gain of function research? From the layman's perspective, it sounds as if you're tweaking an existing naturally occurring virus to make it ever more deadly. Is that a misinterpretation? What does gain of function mean in practice, Dr. McCullough?
That is a correct interpretation. This is looks like an intentional modification of the spike protein so it can dock with the human ACE2 receptor and then inject itself into the human body. And, I've personally been to China 5 times. I've been to some of these labs. And I can tell you, I don't think the Chinese needed our money. I think the money was the last of the considerations here. I think they needed intellectual capital. They needed, through the research granting mechanism process, all that collaboration to put an NIH grant together, working with University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and potentially others. They needed the intellectual capital to figure out a way of making this virus more deadly, and it was very intentional.
This gentleman, Dr. McCullough, is back on Twitter. Follow him right now, P_McCullough. That's MCCULLOUGHMD. That's P_McCullough MD. The McCullough Report is his show at the American Out Loud Talk Radio. And the organization you should check out where he is an advisor is truthforhealth.org. Whilst we're on the basics, Dr. McCullough, let's talk about vaccines. As a child who grew up in the West, grew up in the UK, I was vaccinated as a child. You get that mark on your shoulder. But my understanding was vaccines usually are for very serious diseases, and they provide permanent or semi-permanent immunity. When did we arrive at a situation where we're hearing Pfizer and others say, well, no, a vaccine is something you need to get every 3 or 6 months? Has something changed while I wasn't paying attention?
No, nothing's changed and nothing should change. Vaccines should give robust and complete durable immunity. And I agree with you. I took all the vaccines as well as a child. And like the polio vaccine, it should keep polio from coming back, just like measles, mumps, rubella. Now, I didn't have the chickenpox vaccine because I had chickenpox as a child. I mean, I think it's perfectly fine to accept vaccines, the live attenuated viruses, the killed viruses, and the protein-based vaccines. I'm a doctor. I could get a needle stick injury. I took the hepatitis B vaccine, a protein-based vaccine. My kids went off to college, like 20 million American kids each year. They took the meningococcal vaccine, and we've eradicated these meningococcal outbreaks in dormitories. So I think the vaccine industry is fine. I accept vaccines in my practice as much as any other doctor does, but these COVID-19 vaccines are wholly different. They're gene transfer technology platforms. They actually are classified by the FDA as genetic therapy that should have about 5 years of safety data. All that was abrogated during Operation Warp Speed to about 2 months of observed safety data. They either through messenger RNA or adenoviral DNA, they code for the spike protein we've gone over that has that gain of function research loaded into it. then it basically, through lipid nanoparticles, seeds a mosaic of cells in the body, including the brain, the heart, the other organs. This is the first time we've had a vaccine go to the brain and go to the heart. And then the genetic material is installed into cells, and then the cells start producing the dangerous spike protein. The spike protein damages tissues, causes inflammation in these areas. Then it breaks free and it circulates in the plasma. And that was shown in a paper by Alina Agata from Harvard. It can circulate up to a month afterwards. It damages red blood vessel cells, blood vessel cells, causes blood clotting. It hyperconcentrates in the reproductive organs like the ovaries and the testes. This is gene transfer technology.
Now I'm going to test my theory of what happened during Operation Warp Speed with you momentarily. But first things first, if you enjoy our content, don't forget to support it. Support those who make it possible. People like the great Mike Lindell, the inventor of MyPillow. The left wants to cancel him. They want to destroy this man. Show some love for him. Go to mypillow.com. Purchase any of his more than 150 products. Use my name and Mike will give you up to 66% off. That's mypillow.com. Promo code GORKA. The left wants to cancel Mike because he too is a truth teller. Call 800-829-8468. That's 800-829-8468. mypillow.com. Promo code GORKA. If you haven't done so already, the numbers are piling up. People want to join Dinesh D'Souza and myself for our trip this November to the Holy Land. It's the Stand with Israel tour. Book your tickets right now. We're going to go to all the sites you've read about in the Gospels. If you've been to Israel before, it doesn't matter. You haven't been with me and Dinesh. Join us for the trip of a lifetime. Reserve your tickets by calling 855-565-5519. That's 855-565-5519. StandWithIsraelTour.com. That's StandWithIsraelTour.com. Do you believe that America is the greatest nation on God's earth? Are you a part of the Make America Great Again movement? I'm Sebastian Gorka, former strategist to President Donald J. Trump, and I want to give you the opportunity to share your values and blast them around the world in what you wear. Yes, take the America First message, whether it is about the president's anti-woke agenda, whether it is about stopping the vaccine mandates, my body, my choice, or just telling everyone how you feel about this shining city on a hill. Check out all our amazing gear at sebgorkastore.com, including all of my books. That's sebgorkastore.com. Send the left a message today. Dr. McCullough, Professor McCullough, I was a member of the Trump administration. I wasn't involved with Operation Warp Speed, of course, because my brief was national security issues. But let me run my theory against your expertise when it comes to that operation and see if any of this potentially holds water. So, as you said, record-breaking. We've never had one vaccine, let alone 3, developed in less than a calendar year. Usually takes years and years and years. So my theory is, and I know we have different types of vaccines involved, and I'd like you, again, to stipulate the difference between the old technologies and the new gene-related mRNA technology. My hypothesis is this. The only way that a product could be brought to market as rapidly as it was by cutting corners by the big companies. And as such, we weren't really creating vaccines. These are quasi or pseudo vaccines. And that's why we have, the head of Pfizer saying, yes, you're going to need a booster every 2 months. Well, that's not robust immunity. That's not permanent or semi-permanent immunity from a disease. So my theory is it was rushed, therefore it's not the vaccines of yore, like polio, like chickenpox. And then I need you to explain to us what's different. Does that theory hold water? And then explain to us the difference between the standard vaccine technology and then the mRNA, and why people like Malone, Dr. Malone, who spoke so highly of you, has issues with the technology he himself developed.
Yeah, it is an amazing set of affairs that we have. I agree with you. Corners were cut in terms of a standard vaccine would take 24 months of safety data to see what emerges. And then for genetic transfer technology programs like this, about 5 years of data. You know, there is a messenger RNA therapy I can use in my practice. It's called Batirisan, and it's a small interfering messenger RNA. But we've never used messenger RNA or adenoviral DNA to produce an abnormal lethal protein in the human body and then have the body basically form immunity to it. Just the whole thought of it sounds like a tremendous gamble. And I did publish an op-ed in The Hill last year in August of 2020. And the title of the paper was The Great Gamble of the COVID-19 Vaccine Development Program. I knew as a scientist this was going to be a giant gamble. It was going to be a gamble on safety and efficacy.
Let's just stay here for a second. Why is it so risky? Talk to us about the functionality and what it is doing to the human subject that is injected with this quote-unquote vaccine.
What's really unusual about it is normally there's control over the exposure of the antigen. So let's take the hepatitis B vaccine. It is a set amount of a protein, no more, no less, just like a tetanus shot, no more, no less. In this case, we're injecting lipid nanoparticles, and each person has a variation in terms of what cells take up the lipid nanoparticles, where they distribute. It's kind of like a Russian roulette. And then as these lipid nanoparticles distribute and then ultimately lodge into tissues, then there's a whole nother set of determinants of how much genetic material is taken up and how much spike protein is produced. So, you know, the vast majority of people get a vaccine, probably a lot of it stays in the arm or has minimal distribution, is taken up minimally. They produce some immunity against the spike protein and they're fine. 200 million people took the vaccine and they're fine. But 1 million, they must have either exuberant distribution or they have dramatic uptake, but they must be producing too much spike protein for too long a period of time. And we know when that happens, certainly in our seniors, that can be fatal within the first couple of days. We know in others at risk, it can cause blood clots. And gosh knows there's been reports of thromboses and blood clots all through the vaccine program. It causes neurologic damage. That's the reason why we have all the neurologic warnings on the vaccines. And then finally, it directly causes heart injury, myocarditis. Pfizer and Moderna, we have over 20,000 cases now of damaged hearts due to the vaccines.
And is this phrase we hear again and again of the cytokine storm, is this related to what you're describing?
No, I don't think there's much of a cytokine storm. People do feel sick, immediately sick after the vaccines. It's certainly not like the virus. You know, the virus isn't replicating, it's just the spike protein. But we are seeing spike protein diseases. So there are multi-system inflammatory diseases. There's called vaccine-induced thrombocytopenic purpurias due to the spike protein. And then a whole variety of the neurologic syndromes, transverse myelitis, the Bell's palsy, the Guillain-Barré syndrome. These are now well described.
And you mentioned the myocarditis, the inflammation of the heart muscle. What do we know already? I know it's incredibly hard, given that we're in the midst of the application of the vaccine, but we're seeing, I mean, almost every day there's another report of a soccer player in Europe either keeling over and dying or getting a heart attack at the peak of their fitness. So what do we know about myocarditis with regards to these vaccines, and also myocarditis, especially in the young male population who've been vaccinated?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. Young men are the ones who develop myocarditis. About 90% are men. In a paper by Rose and myself in Current Problems of Cardiology, we showed that the peak incidence is around age 17 to 24 range, and 90% are men. The tail of distribution goes out to age 50. A lot of people don't know that can occur men all the way out to age 50. In a paper by Scharf and colleagues from Kaiser Permanente, the rate of injury per million is far more than we ever thought. It's over 400 cases per million. And originally the CDC said that we were going to have about 63 cases per million. We know that the background rate before the vaccine should be about 4 cases per million. So it's a sky-high number. And the concern with the athletes is they're not reporting chest pain or they don't feel it. And we know if we don't recognize myocarditis and they exert themselves, extreme exertion precipitates sudden cardiac death in myocarditis. And we've seen record numbers of athletes dying on the playing field. Now, we don't know if they've been vaccinated or not. We're just, in a sense, is an assumption until we find out. The interesting thing is why aren't we seeing U.S. athletes dying on the field?
Yes.
Only European.
And is there a theory with regards to that?
I don't. It's just that I know that Europe had much more strict policies on vaccination, and maybe, in fact, they complied. We found out in the NFL, for instance, that not all the players took the vaccine. Recently, Aaron Rodgers mentioned me in one of his podcasts, and it was pretty clear he didn't take the vaccine. He got COVID, and he got through it appropriately so, and he has natural immunity now, and that's his choice. But it's interesting. People kind of thought that all the players took the vaccine, but Aaron Rodgers and others must have various forms of non-disclosure to basically conceal the fact they may not have taken the vaccines.
And they've made some very, very interesting, courageous statements. We're talking to Dr. Peter McCullough. This is America First One-on-One. If you enjoy what you're listening to, check out our new exclusive community on Locals. It's gorka.locals.com. Direct access to me and content you cannot access anywhere else, including news about our two, brand new podcasts. That's gorka.locals.com, gorka.locals.com. I'd like to go back to some of the basics which still haven't been settled, Dr. McCullough. So let's talk about questions of, again, I'm a layman. I'm a doctor of political science, a PhD. Don't ask me to write a prescription. But as far as I'm concerned, I like history. I'm an amateur historian. I haven't found in history examples, precedents of when you quarantine, when you lock down a whole population that is predominantly healthy. Usually the phrase quarantine was meant for the sick. So is that observation correct? Let's talk about that. And then the usage of masks. I don't wear masks. I've had COVID. I refuse to mask myself. What is the utility for the layperson, especially children who are constantly touching their masks? Is there any logic to any of this? But let's start with quarantining the healthy. Is that ever justifiable?
No, it never is, and you're right. Asymptomatic spread of the virus has been disproven by papers by Cow and Madewell. There was a false supposition from the very beginning that this was the first organism in the history of medicine that transmitted from asymptomatic person to asymptomatic person. It doesn't happen with tuberculosis or influenza or any other illness. So that false supposition got into the medical literature. There were papers written that 30 to 50% of the spread was all asymptomatic. There were models that came out of the University of Washington, the Murray model, that was all based on asymptomatic spread, and it was hopelessly wrong in predicting the pandemic. We know that the virus transmits from symptomatic person to susceptible person, and so therefore the only people who need to be quarantined are those who are symptomatic. Now recently the CDC has shortened the quarantine period for asymptomatic test positives to 5 days from 10 days. Many of us are applying that in practice because the Omicron variant is such a short, self-limited illness. So 5 days of quarantine and coming out of the last two, as long as there's no fever or severe symptoms, they can return back to work. Now, we do know that masks have been studied, and there are, I think, 14 now clinical studies demonstrating that masks do not have a significant effect on reducing the spread of disease. First off, if you have two people that don't have the disease and they show up to school wearing a mask, it can't possibly have a difference, right? So it's impossible to show a difference to masking people who aren't acutely sick with the disease. But also a mask expert who I've presented with, Mr. Stephen Petty, has shown with a typical mask, Sebastian, 18% of the air goes around the mask. It goes around the mask. The mask only filters out 3 microns. The virus is 1 micron. So the virus goes straight through the mask, and the virus goes around the mask easily. So you can see that masks are really a hopeless public health measure.
And when somebody says, oh, well, doctors use them, isn't the correct response that doctors know how to use them? And basically you're trying to prevent droplets from when you're in above somebody's chest cavity that's open, you don't want droplets coming out of a doctor who may have the flu or a mild cold. So, the argument that doctors or nurses use them doesn't mean that lay people know how to use them, correct?
That's completely correct. I'm a cardiologist, so I wear a mask in the hospital. And whether we're doing a heart catheterization or in cardiac surgery, when doctors are scrubbed in, our hands are committed on certain instruments. And if we have a sneeze, have you ever had a sneeze that you can't hold back? If you have a sneeze, the only thing that's going to hold back the droplets is going to be the mask. Even if you're not sick, a sneeze could actually let droplets come out that have commensal bacteria in the nose and mouth and go right into the surgical field. So the purpose of doctors wearing a mask is completely different than the purported purpose in COVID-19.
You mentioned Omicron. What is the latest hypothesis or working assumptions on the breakthrough? The fact that we see in certain hospitals up to 40% of those who have caught Omicron are prior vaccinated. Could this be a function of the paucity, the weakness of the vaccines? Is this good news that Omicron is so transmissible but not deadly? Is there any working hypothesis on at least the breakthrough infections?
Omicron is the most highly mutated form of SARS-CoV-2. An excellent paper to look at is Venkatakrishnan in preprint. It has a lot of mutations in the receptor binding domain of the S1 segment, so it doesn't invade the human body to nearly extent. The syndrome is almost always like a head cold without pulmonary involvement. Our initial CDC report indicated it was very benign. In fact, the CDC told us initially on December 10th, 79% of people who had Omicron were fully vaccinated. So it was clear it was breaking through vaccine immunity. But then we had a lot of reports came in, and it's now known that Omicron breaks through natural immunity. So natural immunity previously was robust and complete and durable. You couldn't get, 2 brushes with a fatal case of Delta. But in fact, someone who had a Delta or Alpha could indeed have Omicron. Almost everybody's having it. We have the largest outbreak that we've ever had now. It's clear it's breaking through natural and vaccine immunity. It's still affecting the COVID naive. There's very few of them left here in the United States. And it's been my clinical experience that for the naturally recovered, naturally immune, and the vaccinated, it's quite an easy syndrome. Does not require prescription medicines, does not require anything more than just usual conservative over-the-counter measures. But those who are unvaccinated and still COVID naive, it can be a bit rougher. And we're using various combinations. If we use the monoclonal antibodies, we have to use the GSK sotorivimab antibody, which was specifically designed to handle these mutant strains. That's been EUA approved since May of 2021. Everybody should be pushing their leaders to get the GSK antibody at the critical centers for seniors, for instance, who may still be susceptible. Otherwise, our drugs in combination, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, plus prednisone is common. As soon as the Pfizer pill and Merck pill get out there, we'll use it. Pfizer pill looks good. Combination of a kinase like 3 inhibitor plus a ritonavir, a protease inhibitor for HIV. Over 80% reductions in hospitalizations and death. The Merck product looks a little less effective, about a 30% benefit. We still need to use oral steroids, colchicine, aspirin, anticoagulants, inhaled budesonide. We can put together a package to get people through the illness. We know data, by the way, from Abdullah and colleagues show that the inpatient mortality from Omicron in South Africa, 1%. And if we did better with early treatment, the mortality could be far less than 1%. I don't think any Americans should be worried about going to the hospital or dying with Omicron.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you we're going to talk about therapeutics. Everybody, if you're listening to this and you've got the feeling I have, you got to listen to this podcast multiple times. Cut it to half speed because the amount of data Dr. McCullough is providing us is more than you will get on 3 hours anywhere else. The website is truthforhealth.org, truthforhealth.org. And he's got a 1/3 followers on Twitter already. You've got to follow him. Wow, November 2021, and he's already at 333,000 followers. That's P_McCullough MD, P_McCullough MD. Where to take the discussion now? Okay, let's try this. So let's talk about why people died. I am infuriated when I hear colleagues of mine, especially in California, who have doctors who have prescribed for them ivermectin or hydroxy. I took hydroxy, my doctor prescribed it for me when I caught the COVID, and they have to go to multiple. One colleague had to go to 7 pharmacists before they were prepared to actually give him the legal prescription he had from his doctor. What is the potential argument against therapeutics? Because it is my contention, and please tell me if I'm wrong, that perhaps tens of thousands of people died because COVID was not treated early enough with therapeutics. It developed into a secondary inflammation, especially in the lower lung. And then once they were put on respirators, that was it. It was a matter of time before they died. So can you talk to us about injecting politics into prescriptions and why this war against therapeutics?
You know, we've gone through 2 presidential administrations, 2 surgeon generals, 2 task forces. Do you know not a single official has given a full-throated endorsement of doctors doing everything they can with therapeutics as an outpatient to help patients prevent hospitalization and death? Doctors have not received any support whatsoever from the governmental agencies. In fact, they've received headwinds. There's been statements. The FDA has said, do not use hydroxychloroquine. That was last year. Now, in 2021, the American Medical Association launched a campaign to abolish the use of ivermectin. Now, why would the American Medical Association, which doesn't make treatment recommendations, which the Physicians Political Action Committee, why would the AMA actually wage war against ivermectin? We have over 300 supportive studies with hydroxychloroquine, over 60 with ivermectin. Ivermectin now looks like it's actually quite useful against Omicron. Ivermectin is standard of care in Mexico, across the South America, across India, and in Japan. And these are benign and safe medications. I think our agencies have done us a great disservice by putting a chill on using drugs in combination, early use of drugs, appropriately clinically indicated off-label use of drugs, which the FDA tells doctors we use drugs off-label when there's an unmet need. And it's clear COVID-19 is an unmet need. You said tens of thousands of lives saved. I tell you, I think it is hundreds of thousands of American lives could have been saved. Their lives could have been prolonged. They could have gotten over COVID-19. We did hear this week that our CDC director told us that 75% of the deaths had 4 or more comorbidities. So people who die are older and they're loaded with medical problems. The CDC has always told us at least 90% have another disease in the proximal pathway to death. Italy recently has said 97% have another disease in the proximal pathway to death. A clear example is Colin Powell, where he had terminal myeloma. He had been triple vaxxed. He got COVID. He died. Nobody made a big deal out of it, whether he died of COVID and he died of terminal myeloma. That's actually a large fraction of the COVID deaths. So as we sit here today, maybe 80,000 Americans have died of COVID directly. So that's really our target. We could have, I think, reduced those numbers considerably with early treatment.
And also there seems to be this utter denial of science when it comes to the question of who's vulnerable and how we get beyond COVID. Because for me, isn't the question immunity? And if you have natural immunity, I haven't read, and please, again, correct me if I'm wrong, there is no vaccine of any technology which would provide a human being like me who's had COVID with more protection than actually having COVID gave me in terms of antibodies. So surely the question, Dr. McCullough, isn't vaccinated or not. The question is immunity or not.
I agree with that. I mean, the one working example where the vaccine could be better than the natural infection would be tetanus, and we all accept a tetanus shot once every 10 years. I think that's perfectly fine. It's purified tetanus toxoid. And I look forward to future vaccines. Listen, Novavax is an antigen-based vaccine. They may be able to tweak that, and that could help protect our high-risk seniors or nursing home workers. But whatever we do with the vaccine program from this point forward, it ought to be limited and targeted. I think we've really had mass vaccination backfire across the population. I think we should drop all the vaccine mandates right now. It can make the Supreme Court's job very easy. Just drop them. The virus has mutated. The vaccines are essentially obsolete right now. And then we should pause the current program. I think Pfizer, Moderna, J&J can come off the market. We can evaluate for safety, figure out what went wrong, and then look towards newer vaccines in kind of a second wave for our high-risk vulnerable seniors.
And let me make one more statement of just logic in terms of analyzing how vaccine works. When we are told again and again and again from the White House, from state officials and what have you, and CDC and et cetera, that you must get vaccinated to protect others, well, the whole point of the vaccination, I understood it, is to prevent the worst case developing in the person who took the vaccine, because if a vaccinated person can contract and spread the vaccine, then the logic that you're protecting others, doesn't it collapse, Dr. McCullough?
Yeah, the logic's completely collapsed. There's a paper in Lancet by Singarajan and colleagues, really careful case contact tracing. they demonstrated that 39% of transmission was from fully vaccinated to fully vaccinated. So there's been these outbreaks where fully vaccinated populations give each other COVID-19. So in no way can we consider like workplace vaccination to provide any meaningful impact and protection against COVID. What we saw through the year with the legacy variants is we did see a protection against death. It was very modest, but in the 1040 paper, the Ivy Network, a wonderful high-quality science network, showed that for those fully vaccinated, the in-hospital mortality was between 6 and 7%, and those who were unvaccinated in the hospital, mortality was between 8 and 9%. So there was a difference. In the Cone paper from the VA, it showed about a 12-point differential in survival in those over 65 who were vaccinated. Now, under 65, there was just a 1-point improvement in survival. But the vaccines did do something in terms of reducing the risks of death, but it was pretty modest.
He is a practicing internist cardiologist from Texas. He is the host of the McCullough Report at America Out Loud Talk Radio. And the website you should check out is truthforhealth.org. That's truthforhealth.org. His Twitter handle is P_McCullough MD. That's P_McCullough MD. You don't have to comment, Dr. McCullough, explicitly. Let me just say this. If you like what you're listening to, if this information is of utility to you, please don't forget that you can get it for free and not miss any episode of One-on-One by subscribing to the podcast. Wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, what have you, look for my name, Sebastian Gorka, America First. Subscribe and you'll never miss any of our interviews. Share and review so the knowledge spreads as wide as possible. I want to play a cut that I just heard last night that shocked me. Truly, it was a surreptitiously taken video by a patient from Texas. And you don't have to comment directly on it. You are welcome to do so if you wish. But I think it's just an illustration of how politicized healthcare has become. This is an individual who wants to get some kind of healthcare from his local clinic or hospital. And, they have a message for him based upon his skin color. Play cut.
So I'm not gonna be able to get it today because I don't qualify. Yeah. What if I like smoke and vape? I heard that was no. Okay. But if I were black and Hispanic, then I'd be able to qualify. Okay. So I'm being denied medical service because of my race. Is that?
That's the criteria.
That's the criteria. That's futurenews.com. It was played by Tucker Carlson, an individual who wants to be vaccinated, and he is told that he can't receive it right now because he is the wrong skin color. He's white. If he were black or Hispanic, he would be afforded that treatment. In your history, I don't know how many decades you've been practicing, Dr. McCullough, have you ever seen such an injection of politics into or perversion of the Hippocratic Oath?
I've never seen a medical decision made on skin color. You know, that may have been actually regarding the use of monoclonal antibodies. He may have been seeking monoclonal antibodies, and they're using.
I think you're right. I think you're right. Yes.
Yeah, and they were doing a medication based on race. Now, we do know African Americans and Hispanics have about double the mortality with COVID-19, and in a sense, it may be a form of a rationing strategy. But Americans are going to reject that. People are sick. They need to be cared for individually. I mean, come on. We've had GlaxoSmithKline approved since May of 2021. I told Sean Hannity this week, I said, come on, this is our battle of the bulge right now. We need ammo. We can't be out of our ammo when we're fighting this most recent surge. We are going to have some high-risk seniors. I've used Sotorivimab, the GSK product, in my practice in a high-risk senior, and I'm convinced it saved her life. I mean, she avoided hospitalization. I was able to use the other drugs. Come on, our government needs to pull through and get GSK distributed out to the centers and have plenty for everybody.
You're not a pediatrician, Dr. McCullough, but you must be surrounded by them or have talked to them. My greatest concern as a parent is what damage we are doing to the next generation, not only with the masks in schools and the shutting down of the schools, but also the vaccination of 5-year-olds and above. What are your pediatric colleagues telling you about the potential long-range consequences of bad health policy with regards to COVID?
The pediatric societies are split on vaccination. One of the major societies doesn't feel it's warranted. The other one does. I think it should be a parental decision for sure. But we know that children have a very mild disease. It's treatable early if there's high risk features. We've had roughly 600 deaths of children who have died with COVID, but they've largely died of cancer or cystic fibrosis or other problems. It's been estimated only one child in the whole country actually died of COVID, the respiratory illness. Sadly, that child wasn't treated well enough early. We know that children basically are an immune buffer. There have not been school outbreaks of COVID-19 this year. All the kids have been back to school this fall. No school outbreaks. We're holding the kids back from school right now for 2 weeks because of Omicron. I think that's fine just because everybody's sick at once. But there is no scientific or medical justification. It's not clinically indicated to have the children join the research program. Remember, the vaccines are all research. So to have the children, join in research and have the parents sign as a legally authorized representative, we don't need to do it. I've said, like many European countries have, in a sense, kept Moderna, for example, away from children. We could draw a line at age 30 or maybe at age 50 and say, listen, we could avoid a lot of hardship, a lot of angst by taking those groups out of the vaccine program.
Last question, Dr. McCullough. I've had my personal physician on my show several times for a whole hour, Dr. Pappas, very, very popular episodes. My conclusion as a patient is the following, and I'd ask you to give any advice to our millions of listeners and viewers on top of that, is these decisions, I don't care what the health threat is, but including COVID, the decisions should be taken by the individual concerned in consultation with their doctor. Is there any other advice you would give those who are listening right now and are just swimming in a sea of information and disinformation?
Sure. Every therapy, every vaccine has risks and benefits. So the fiduciary relationship is between the patient and the doctor. So they decide together. It's called shared decision making. And then for the hospital care and the clinic care, it's called the principle of autonomy. The patient really, in the end, gets to decide what they receive within reason. So, we want to see things to be much more flexible, much more comprehensive and creative with respect to early treatment for COVID-19. And we want to see a fair, balanced discussion based on any vaccine that's put out there at this point in time. I think Pfizer, Moderna, J&J, since they don't cover Omicron and they had very poor coverage against Delta, I think they can be retired, and then we can pause the program and then look for new vaccines to come forward.
Thank you, Dr. McCullough. We could continue this for hours. I know you've paid a personal, professional toll for actually keeping your medical oath. I thank you on behalf of so many who are trying to divine the truth in all of the propaganda out there. God bless you for doing what you do. He is the host of the McCullough Report on America Out Loud Talk Radio. You can follow him on Twitter at P_McCulloughMD. You can actually support Dr. McCullough in his research and in his travels. The givesendgo.com URL is on his Twitter page. It's givesendgo.com/G2DR5, a very, very worthy cause. And of course, you can support him or find out more about his work at truthforhealth.org. That's truthforhealth.org. I'm Sebastian Gorka. This has been America First One-on-One. Wherever you are, keep your head on a swivel, watch your six, hold the line, never give up, never give in, and stay frosty.